Hello, it's Matt McLachlan. Before we get to this week's podcast, I wanted to extend a very special invitation to you. In August 2025, my signature tour is heading back to the Western Front, and I'd love you to come with me. We're going to explore the battlefields of France and Belgium and tell the entire story of the Australians during the First World War. It's going to be an amazing trip. We're going to visit the Somme, we're going to visit the Ypres Salient, French Flanders, famous battlefields such as Passchendaele, Pozières, Villers-Bretonneux, Bullecourt, Fromelles, and many more. Now, this is the only tour I'm going to personally escort to the Western Front in 2025. So if you'd like to come with me, please don't wait. The tour sells out very, very quickly. It departs Paris on the 30th of August, 2025, and you can find full information at our website, which is battlefields.com.au.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
Hello, it's Matt McLachlan, and thank you for joining me on a very special episode of Living History. Now, the Olympics are underway. It's always a really special time when the Olympics are going on for all of us who love our sport. And I wanted to bring you, in order to celebrate the Olympics, a very special episode. Now, this is an episode about an Olympian called Cecil Healy, who was a gold medal swimmer who was sadly killed during the First World War. And we originally ran this episode on our BattleWalks podcast, our sister podcast, with me and with Pete Smith, during the last Olympics in 2021 to talk all about Cecil Healy and his great achievements on the Western Front and his great achievements during the Olympics. So now that the Olympics are back, I wanted to bring you this special episode because it's a hell of a story and it deserves to be more widely known than it is. So please enjoy this special episode all about Olympian Cecil Healy.
A Living History production.
I'm Matt McLachlan.
And I'm Pete Smith.
We're battlefield historians who love nothing better than getting out and walking the ground where great battles in history took place.
And now we'd like you to come with us. Every week, BattleWalks will take you to one of the great battlefields of Europe.
As we walk the ground, we'll dig through the pages of history. We'll uncover the secrets of the battlefields, and most importantly, we'll tell the stories of the people who fought and died there.
Welcome to BattleWalks.
Hello and welcome to BattleWalks. We are back after a little break, and thank you for joining us again as we walk the great battlefields of Europe. Thank you for contacting us. We had so many people coming back to us during our short summer break asking when we will be back and telling us how much they enjoy the podcast. So thank you so much for that. It's always great to get feedback. So please keep doing that. Send us your comments on Facebook, send us tweets via Twitter, and just let us know you're out there and that you're enjoying the show. I'm going to bring in right now my co-host, Pete Smith. Pete, g'day. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi Matt, great to be back. Having had a nice break, a nice summer's break, but great to be back again.
Today's podcast, it's going to be really interesting. A little bit of a departure. We're not walking a battlefield, but we're in the middle of the Olympic season. We've just had the Summer Olympics taking place. The Paralympics are on as we speak. And so we wanted to talk about a connection between Olympians and the battlefield. So Pete, why don't you give us the rundown on what we're going to be talking about today?
Okay, so what we wanted to do is have a look at those that had taken part in the Olympic Games either prior to the Great War or post after the Great War, and who had served in the military. So I just thought it was a great idea. Sadly, not all of them will make it through the Great War, but it just seemed like a good thing to do, to have a look, because it's the early days of the Olympics, have a look at those early days of the Olympics and also some of those athletes that took part in one way or another in the Great War.
Well, it's a great idea, mate, and the Olympics is about the world coming together, and it's fascinating to think that through times of recent history, the Olympics have been disrupted by war. I mean, at some stages it's still gone ahead in some capacity, either in the lead up or immediately after a war. But the Olympics were disrupted by war, so it's it's always fascinating to me, the link between sport and war as well, is that you tend to get it tends to be seen by a lot of the soldiers as the ultimate sporting event is to go off and fight in a war. So there's always been a very strong connection between sport and war. And we're looking at a couple of, we're focusing on Australians for this episode, but a couple of very prominent Australians who went off and not only served in the war, but also participated in the Olympics.
Yeah, I think it was interesting for me to have a look at some of the sports within the Olympics, and when you start looking at them carefully, you realise that there is a big element of kind of military skill. You know, that there's obviously always been shooting, the skiing, and just so many things. That some sports don't exist anymore. There was the tug of war. Swinging clubs. So club swinging, it's something that was done in the military. It was done by civilians to keep you fit, but it was definitely had a military feel to it. So there was an awful lot of the sports had a distinct military feel. Interestingly, in doing the research for this, I looked at some of the sports that no longer exist, and one of those sports was actually not target pistol shooting. It was literally using the old duels, so dueling pistols, and you had mock duels taking place, and they would you were scored on your hitting the target in these mock duels. So just fascinating. So some things they even proposed. I think one of the more interesting ones. They even proposed, and this was just after the First World War, throwing the hand grenade, lobbing the grenade as would this be a great Olympic sport? And I think too many people have been throwing grenades in the First World War, so they decided not to go ahead with that sport.
Just extraordinary. And I mean, we see things as well about at the start of the First World War. There was a big push to join the Sportsman's 1,000. You know, get out, and if you're a sportsman, this is the ultimate challenge for you, to join up with other sportsmen and put down the golf clubs and jump out of the pool and head off and prove your worth on the field of battle as opposed to the sporting field. So there's always been this very strong connection. And it's amazing when you read Victoria Cross citations about how many of the men that achieved great things on the battlefield had been captain of their local football team, or an athlete before the war, or a great runner. It just seems a theme that meanders through this history. So I think this is going to be a really exciting way to look at the Olympics in a bit of a new light. Yeah,
I think it's fascinating. And going back to those posters, the recruiting posters, I mean, what a fantastic thing to collect. I love them. I haven't ever been able to get the money together to buy some of the posters that you can get. But yeah, that sporting theme runs through an awful lot of the recruiting posters. Another thing to say as well, of course, is that a soldier's life on the Western Front or elsewhere in Egypt or wherever he may be, both prior to the war and after the war and during the war, there was a massive element of sport, because to keep the men occupied, and what they're trying to do is keep them away from the women and the booze, but keep them occupied behind the lines, organise some sports games. And so there were some great sporting occasions that took place behind the lines during the war.
I was reading a war diary the other day, and of one of the units, and actually went into the months after the end of the war. So this was the time when they were kicking around in the UK or in France, waiting to be sent back to Australia. And there was a lot of sporting events taking place at that time. And for example, the Australian Corps taking on the Royal Flying Corps in a game of rugby, and defeated the Australians won 42-0 against the Royal Flying Corps, and the Air Force, as it was at the time, the Royal Air Force, and just extraordinary the engagements that took place. All they seemed to do in that year after the war ended, before they got back to Australia, was kick a ball around and play sport, because there was bugger all else for them to do.
Exactly, and there had been some quite severe riots. Certainly, one of the more severe riots with the Canadian soldiers, and actually some Canadian soldiers were killed. They were shot by actually British soldiers trying to put down the riots. So that there had been riots both in France here and in Britain, and so it was thought that sport would counter that. While the men were kicking their heels, waiting to be discharged and sent back to various parts of the empire, that sport would hopefully keep their mind away from other things, and so yes, sport became a very, very important in that period as men kicked their heels, waiting to be discharged back home.
Well, let's get going talking about some of these historians. Who are we going to start with?
Well, I wanted to start with somebody who I've got to know very well over the years, metaphorically, of course. He's long since gone, but Cecil Healy, He was an Olympic swimmer prior to the Great War. There's a swimming pool in Peronne, one of the nearest towns to where I live here in France, and the pool that my children swim in, and my partner Sarah goes swimming and doing exercise there, and I go with the children swimming as well. It's the Cecil Healy pool. So Cecil Healy is the first person that we want to have a look at, I think.
Well, Cecil Healy has a very strong connection to me as well, Pete, because I'm from the northern beaches of Sydney. That's where I live, and pretty much every day when I go for a walk down along Manly Beach, I go past the surf club where Cecil was a member, and there's a big plaque in his honour out the front of the surf club. The surf club, I had a look the other day and sadly discovered it was built in the 30s, the building, so it wasn't actually the building that Cecil knew when he was at Manly. But there's a plaque remembering him there, and many of his achievements are recorded inside that surf club as well. So tell us a bit more about Cecil Healy.
Yeah, well, I'll just go over that the surf club's issue, interesting issue, because in doing the research on Cecil, then I became very much aware that he'd been involved in the surf clubs close to Manly, and I certainly, just reading between the lines, and you could probably expand on it a little bit, Matt, is that there was obviously a lot of rivalry between the surf clubs, I would guess, and he joined the East Sydney Amateur Swimming Club. And the North Stein, is that the way you say that word? Stein?
Stein. North Stein.
And I always say it wrong. You can guarantee if there's a way of saying it, I'll say it wrong. So he joined their surf life saving club, and was also a gold honour badge holder of the Manly Surf Club in 1907. So he was involved in several of the surf clubs in the area.
Well, it's interesting discussing those surf clubs because Manly is where I first lived when I moved from the bush many years ago, 25 years ago. And so it's quite well known in the Manly area. But it's interesting. It's a long beach, Manly. It's about 1.5 kilometres long, so about a mile long. And there's 3 surf clubs on that stretch of beach. And, today it's not such a big deal because everyone's very friendly and gets on very well. But you're right. Back in the day, there was quite a rivalry. So there's the main surf club, which is at South Stein, which is the one that is generally just referred to as Manly Surf Club. And then at the northern end of the beach is Queenscliff Surf Club, which is another big one. And then in the middle is this tiny little one called North Stein, and that's the one that gets a bit overlooked. But that was the one that Cecil was most closely associated with, and that's where he is now remembered and recorded. And it's a cute little building. It's the only original building dating from the 1930s. The other surf clubs are very modern. And it's a cute little spot right in the middle of Manly Beach. Very overlooked when it comes to surf events and sports. North Stein gets a little bit overlooked, but it's a good little link with history, that club. As I said, sad that the building is only dates from the 1930s, so Cecil Healy wouldn't have actually seen that building, but it's still a very strong link with the history of Cecil Healy.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the info. I'll add it to my records.
Tell us more about Cecil.
Yeah, sure thing. So he was born on the 28th of November in 1881 in Darlinghurst. Have I said that name right? I think I've got that one right.
Correct. Very good. Very good. This is a great tour through the many places of Australia for you.
His father was called Patrick Joseph Healy, and he was a barrister. So you can tell from that this is a fairly well-heeled family, and he was the third son. So born in Australia. Educated and here we go again, Bowral, is that right? Primary school at Bowral.
Very good, mate. Bowral, well done.
So Bowral, and straight away, even that he's
also the home of Don Bradman, I should say. So a good sporting pedigree out that way.
Yeah, and I think he obviously came from a sporty family and would have been pushed in that direction, I suspect, and obviously was a very good swimmer, because in 1895 he won the 66-yard handicap race at the old Sydney. Oh dear, here we go again. Natatorium. I think that's right. Sydney Natatorium. And
it's a word I'm not familiar with. Natatorium.
Yeah, I don't know what that means actually. What the heck is a natatorium? Anyway, so straight away involved in swimming, and he's going to both continue after his primary school. He went to a college in Sydney. Go on, Matt. What's this college called?
St. Aloysius. He went to.
Thank you. We were discussing this earlier about how I pronounce this name. So Aloysius College in Sydney, and steadily improved. And in 1901, with others, he won the 500 yards. I keep struggling with this because it keeps changing from, when I was researching this, from yards to metres. So I'm going to do it in both in this case. 500 yards, 455 metres, flying squadron team race. And this is in the New South Wales Championships. And this was the first time of many that he was successful. His team won that competition. And he was involved in middle distance racing, and so it's ongoing. It's ongoing. I'm not going to read out all of his awards as we slowly work our way towards eventually him being involved in the Olympics.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Interestingly, one of the guys that he was regularly racing again, and we're going to be talking about him during this podcast as well, is Frank Burrapair, who was also a swimmer, and Healy and him very often swam against each other. So by the time we get to the 1912 Stockholm Olympics, going to take place in Stockholm, he was considered to be one of the world's best swimmers. So you get the idea of how his fame has slowly spread around the world, and eventually, I say, by 1912, seen as one of the world's best swimmers. So, Stockholm, 1912, and he became part of the gold medal record-winning 4x200 freestyle relay team. So he's part of the relay team. But that's not why he's really remembered. Do you know why he's remembered, Matt? Sorry, I know I'm just throwing that straight at you, but I just wondered if you know anything about why he's well remembered, because it's extraordinary, really.
I think there's a surfing link, but I can't remember the specifics of what actually happened with Cecil.
No, Cecil is remembered for throwing the opportunity for him to win another individual gold medal, and it's an interesting story, and it's about, I suppose it's him, it's the man himself, because what happens is that because of a mix-up in the heats. He realises that all of his competitors, and these are the competitors that potentially are going to cause him a real problem in trying to get the gold medal, are disqualified, and they're disqualified because they don't make it to the at the right time at the right place. So there was the confusion. So they're disqualified, which would have put Healy as almost certainly he would have won the gold medal because all of the people that were his main competitors, and the most important one was a chap called Duke Kahanamoku. I have no doubt that I am saying that wrong. I'm going to try again. Kahanamoku. That's what it looks like anyway. And he's an American, and he's going to actually win the gold medal, but he was one of the ones that had been disqualified for not turning up. So they appeal, and they have their appeal turned down. They appeal. They're nearly all Americans. I think they're all Americans apart from one, and they have their appeal turned down. And he goes back and appeals on their behalf, and basically says, "I will not swim if you do not reinstate them." And so these guys are reinstated into the final, and he gets the silver. Healy gets the silver medal. He didn't get the gold. The Duke beat him, and so he effectively shot himself in the foot. But he did it deliberately. I mean, it's a fantastic piece of sportsmanship, and one that is remembered to this day. And in fact, in 2018, the Australian Olympic Committee created a Sportsman's Award in honour of what he did in these 1912 Olympics, and also marking the 100th anniversary of his death. Because as we're going to discuss, sadly, he is going to be killed during the during the First World War.
Well, that was the when I recalled a surfing connection. That was why, because Duke Kahanamoku was the bloke that brought surfing to Australia. Again, so many coincidences in the next beach along from where Cecil Healy swam in his career at Freshwater Beach was where the Duke introduced surfing to Australia, from Hawaii to Australia.
I knew he was a Hawaiian, but that's fascinating. Of course, I should have got the link: Hawaiian surfing and Australia. That's really interesting, Matt. Didn't know that at all. So yeah.
So it's literally only probably a kilometre from where Cecil Healy would have swum in the surf, was where Duke first came out and wowed Australians by riding a surfboard in the surf. And obviously now, very much in the same stretch of beach where Cecil Healy swam in the surf is now where is a very popular surfing spot. So these little connections of history weave their way through the whole story.
Well, there's another one that I'm just going to mention casually as well, because in the 1912 Olympics was where Fanny Durack also swam in the first time that women could took part in swimming. In women's Olympic swimming team, so and she will win a gold medal as well. And of course, we remember Fanny Durack. Not of course, for people that do not know, Fanny Durack is remembered here on the battlefields because of the statue, the Golden Madonna and Child in Albert, which was hit by a shell. I can't remember if we've done the story in one of our podcasts, perhaps we have, but it ends up leaning over the town at 90 degrees, and to the Australian soldiers it became known as Fanny Durack because it looked like a woman about to dive into the surf, or into the pool. And so Fanny Durack is somebody who is involved in the Olympics, but certainly was not involved in the Great War in coming out onto the battlefields, but is remembered here as well, along with Cecil Healy. Fanny Durack is perhaps another of the more famous Olympiads remembered here on the Western Front.
We discussed it in our enjoyable podcast we did on the approach march to Pozières. So if people go back and listen to that one, that was when we talked about the famous Fanny Durack, which was what the Australians called as you say, the Leaning Virgin. It's interesting. I think I probably mentioned at the time as well that when they built the Olympic Stadium and the Olympic precinct out at Homebush for the 2000 Olympics, and they named all the streets, all these new streets, after famous Australian Olympians. They did name a street after Fanny Durack, but obviously their sensibilities got the better of them because they ended up calling it Sarah Durack Avenue, which was her first name. The reason she was called Fanny, of course, is her second name was Frances, which is where the Fanny came from. But obviously it was too much to name a street Fanny Durack Avenue, so they called it Sarah Durack Avenue, and then from then on, no one knows who the hell they're actually talking about with the street because she was only ever known as Fanny Durack. So it was a bit of a curious one, but there we go. So when you go down Sarah Durack Avenue, it's actually the connection is to Fanny Durack and the Leaning Virgin of Albert.
Matt, I'd just like to say, I think you're getting almost as good at myself as going off on strange tangents. We're both getting good at it.
We are indeed. We are indeed. We need some sort of bell or some sort of chime so people know that there's an obscure tangent coming up. I think that's part of our charm, Pete, that we wander off all over the place. We've often said it that listening to this podcast is a little bit like sitting down and having a beer with Pete and I, and just the stream of consciousness that comes along. So I think our loyal listeners will forgive us for that.
Yeah, I agree. So on to his military career. I found this quite interesting. So you would imagine with his education, his standing within the country, that he would have immediately gone for a commission and joined as an officer. And he doesn't. And in fact, he doesn't enlist until the 15th of September 1915. And he's 32 years old, so you have to think that most of the guys that are joining are 18 or less, and so he would have been seen as a seriously old guy in some of these battalions of very young men. The only exception potentially being the officers, and it's perhaps one of the reasons why he wasn't placed instantly in an infantry battalion, and he actually worked at the 2nd Divisional Base Depot in France. And he was the regimental quartermaster sergeant. Now, interestingly, that puts him almost above a lot of the junior officers. He's the equivalent of God. He's running effectively everything, and I think that shows that they've used him instead of thinking, well, we won't put this guy into an infantry battalion. We need him here doing this because he's obviously very good at organisation. He's a driven man, which we know he was, and so he was organising the supplies and stores for the 2nd Division, effectively. So a very important guy. But it wasn't enough for him. And I think he felt he was shirking his responsibilities. We can only guess at what went through these people's heads as they're on the Western Front. It's very difficult to put yourself in their position, but you just know that Cecil would have been a really driven man, to get where he did with swimming. And so he obviously decides he's not doing enough, and he requests to be put on an infantry cadet battalion course, so to be trained as an infantry officer. And he qualifies for a commission in the May of 1918. So he did that job as the regimental quartermaster sergeant for quite some time. And it's not until the May of 1918 that he's appointed a second lieutenant. Well, it's actually the June of 1918 by he's appointed a second lieutenant. And he's taken on the strength of the 19th Battalion in France on the 15th of August. So that's when he actually gets to the Western Front as an infantryman. 15th of August, we're in the 100 days. So this is it wasn't for a long time, and I've talked about this before, was not really a famous action. The 100 days, it was almost like 100 days of fighting, then the war ends. We now know an awful lot more about what went on within those 100 days, sometimes known as the advance to victory. And he's going to be doing what an infantry officer should do. He's leading from the front. He's a second lieutenant still, and is in a village of Biaches. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce that either, a French village. And that is just beyond, if you imagine you're heading due east from Villers-Bretonneux, and that's the direction that we're pushing the Germans back. And he is, sadly, he's killed while leading his men in an attack against an enemy machine gun position, and he was shot in the head and killed outright. And this is the really sad bit. After being on the Western Front but behind the lines for all that time, he was literally in the line with his battalion, his infantry battalion, for just 2 weeks before he was killed. He was buried in a field, and it's described as 3/4 of a mile northwest of Biaches and 1 3/4 miles west of Peronne, and a wooden cross was erected. There is, in the Australian War Memorial, a photo of his battlefield grave, and that was taken on the 21st of September in 1918. And we can see it's not your standard boring, that's not a very good word, it's just standard cross. So a standard cross, aluminium stamping with the wording on of who you are. It wasn't that at all. This was a very fancy, well-made cross, almost certainly made by the pioneer section of his battalion. And we know from reading the diaries of the battalions that that's what they did. They went back and put up better crosses than the standard war graves cross produced by the grave registration units, and that's what they did on his grave. Now, I don't know whether his body was then lost at some stage and discovered later on, but it's not until 1926 that his body was exhumed along with 4 of his men killed at the same time. So in other words, it's a battlefield burial. They were put together and they're all exhumed together in 1926, and he rests in Asvilliers New British Cemetery, and that's where him and his 4 men that died with him are buried today, or we can go and see him. He remains the only Australian Olympic gold medalist to lose his life in the line of duty. So he's the only gold medalist that was actually killed during the First World War. And actually, that may be in the line of duty. I'm not quite sure what period that's covering. I must have taken that out of a book somewhere along the line. I didn't scribble down whether that's First and Second World War, because the line of duty implies that possibly he may be the only one. I'm sure somebody will know. Somebody will put us right. But certainly for the First World War, he was the only Olympic gold medalist to lose his life in the line of duty. As I say, he's not forgotten. His name is outside the pool where we go swimming. And in fact, every year they have a competition known as the Cecil Healy Challenge. Now, sadly, in this terrible period we're going through at the moment with the COVID, they've tried to run it this year, but there's so many restrictions, there's so many issues here with people not having their jabs and the wearing of masks that they can't get enough people to take part in it. Sarah, my other half, she'd put her name down for it, but not enough, and so it was cancelled again for the second time. So the Cecil Healy Challenge, hopefully we'll try again next year, and that normally consists of it's a walk and a swim, so it's part walk, part part swim, and it would have been the 103rd anniversary of his death this year. I know he's on the Manly War Memorial. I'm sure you've seen him, Matt. You must have had a look at his name on the Manly War Memorial.
I have indeed. I've seen his name both on the War Memorial at Manly and also at the Lifesaving Club. Of course, he's very well commemorated there in two Lifesaving Clubs, both Manly and in North Steyne. The two clubs about a kilometre apart from each other.
Yeah, he's also commemorated on St Aloysius College's Roll of Honour, so he's there as well. And I believe he's commemorated on the Healy Shield for Life Saving in New South Wales, so that must be given yearly, presumably, as well. So that's Cecil Healy. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about him, Matt. I think we've done him.
Well, it's such a great story, and he's not particularly well known in Australia. He's known in very small circles. Obviously, in Manly, he's very well known. He's known for people who know their Olympic history. He's well known. But I think it's fascinating. There's another small connection with my family because he was killed. Well, he was killed in the lead up to the Battle of Mont St Quentin, which was the most famous action that took place at the end of August, early September 1918, and one of the most famous Australian actions. And this was a small action leading up to that. So he's generally considered to have been killed at Mont St Quentin. And the men from my hometown in West Wyalong enlisted into the 20th Battalion, and Mont St Quentin was their most famous action. So Mont St Quentin for my family has always been an iconic battle, one of the most, the one that we're most drawn to on the Western Front. And it's fascinating that we moved from West Wyalong to Manly, and when we got to Manly, one of Manly's most famous sons was Cecil Healy, who'd been killed at that same battle. So, again, the ripples of history just travelling along and connecting us all. So, yeah, Cecil's someone who's very important in my world, and someone who deserves more research done about him. There's been a couple of books written about him, but there's always room for more research. So if you've enjoyed hearing Cecil's story, I would certainly encourage you to go out and learn more about him. Just a great all-round bloke, a great Australian, a great soldier.
Interestingly, I just add one little aspect. Asvilliers, where he's actually buried, is quite away from Mont St Quentin and from, in fact, where he sadly lost his life. And I think that's partly due to when he was found, because he was found quite a little while after the war. Then there was felt to be no compunction to bury him close by, and so it's one of the cemeteries that would have been an open cemetery that was still taking bodies, still taking the remains of soldiers. And so they end up being moved to Asvilliers. Now, Asvilliers, for those that are whistling down the A1, the major motorway linking Lille to Paris, then it's where one of the services is actually called Asvilliers Services, and if you stop there, then you can have a think about him. He's literally, if you knew where to look, his grave is literally just by the side of the motorway, or the cemetery where he's buried is just by the side of the motorway. So you'll whistle past him if you're on that road between Lille and Paris.
And when you say services, Pete, in Australia we'd say a service station, so services for your car, for petrol and food, which are so important when you're travelling through the battlefield area, because it's sometimes the only places in these obscure locations where you can get a cup of coffee and a sandwich. So the motorway services become your best friend, and in the very French way, they're exceptionally well done. The quality of the food and coffee and everything you get there is far beyond anything we would see in Australia.
The coffee there is very, very good. It's my favourite place to stop whilst on that motorway, I have to say.
Well, Pete, that was the story of Cecil Healy, a fantastic first instalment in this special series of Olympians. We've got several more we're going to talk about as we go on throughout the rest of the year. So tune in to hear more about that. But Cecil Healy, a bit of a personal hero of mine, and just someone that I think set off this series very, very well. A great Australian, as we said, a great Olympian, and a great soldier who sadly gave his life, like so many of these bright young men did during the First World War.
Yes, I'll just give you an insight into who we're going to have a look at the next time when we cover one of the Olympiads, and that's a chap called Claude Angelo. And if you think Cecil Healy wasn't particularly well known, you wait till we start talking about Claude Angelo. Very, very interesting chap.
Well, thank you for joining us. Now that we're back on BattleWalks, next week we'll be walking a great battlefield of Europe once again. We're looking forward to getting out in the field and virtually walking a battlefield. And don't forget to support the podcast if you like what you hear on Buy Me a Coffee /BattleWalks. You can go there and contribute if you want to. And Pete, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's really good doing these occasional specials, and we look forward to getting back next week and strolling the battlefields, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Looking forward to it, Matt. It's been good. Nice to be back.
As the days get shorter and the nights chillier, it's tough to keep up your fall workout routine. Thankfully, there's Alo Moves, the app that brings workouts and wellness to the comfort of your home. Join alomoves.com with code ACAST for a 30-day free trial and 20% off an annual membership. From yoga and Pilates to sound baths and meditations, Alo Moves has it all, with classes made to fit every schedule. Find your perfect wellness routine anytime and anywhere with code ACAST at alomoves.com.